This is the Amadon Planet Podcast, episode 34. I am your host, Joel Amadon. Thank you for joining me on this never-ending quest to figure out how to teach better. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Alaman, artist and creative minister at the Woodlands United Methodist Church Harvest Campus. Better yet, he is a friend and former youth minister to my oldest son and an outstanding person to talk to for this podcast. This episode is another one in the Create series. So we started 2020. Wow, feels like a long time ago we started 2020. But we started with this word create as kind of a word of the year to guide some of the series of podcasts that I kind of inserted throughout the episodes that really tapped into the creative arts and thinking about how can we think about the creative arts, think about some of these creative endeavors, and how can we use some of those to figure out how to teach better. And I was doing a little bit of reflecting and thinking, like, what's create a really good word to pick for this year? And thinking about where 2020 is going, I'm like, you know what? Probably, yeah. Because we've had to be very creative in thinking about how do we teach given this new normal, these unprecedented times, whichever, phrase you want to use that we've heard over and over again this year. And so Lo's a great person to talk to for this Create series because he's a creative guy. He's a spoken word poet. He's also an author. He just wrote a book called We Sang a Dirge, Poems, Laments, and Other Things That Matter to God. We're going to talk about that within the episode. And what's kind of exciting is we're going to give some of these books away. I'm excited to promote his book. I'm excited to share his book, and I'm excited to give it away through what I'm calling the Amadon Planet Birthday Giveaway Month. I don't know if that rings off the tongue or rolls off the tongue very well, but whatever. We're going to give some things away. Last year during my birthday month, which is October, that's when this podcast is being released, is October 1st, 2020. But last year during my birthday month, I asked folks to purchase some shirts, some of those Be the Good shirts. And you've probably seen them if you've been on my Instagram feed or Facebook, or you've probably seen these Be the Good shirts being promoted. And basically what it did was the purchase of those shirts offset some of the production costs of the Amadon Planet podcast. And we've been so appreciative. I am. Not we. I'm not using row. I am very appreciative. I'm very humbled. I love seeing those shirts out there. I love, scrolling on my Instagram feed or Facebook and seeing someone wearing one of those shirts, just living life, because it's a good message. I know when I wear those shirts out, people pause. They ask me about it. And you know what? I think that message of be the good and believe there is good in the world, those are good messages to have. And so, again, thank you for that response last year. This year, we're going to, instead of asking you to purchase stuff, but you still can, by the way, you still can purchase stuff. Links are in the show notes. Links are on the bottom of AmadonPlanet.com to the Amadon Planet store if you are interested in one. But this year, instead of asking you to purchase something, we're asking you to get something. Can we ask you to get something? Yeah, we're asking you to get something. So this year, we're giving away some stuff. We're going to start by giving away some pre-orders to Lo's book. And the easy thing to do is, 1, listen to the podcast, which you're already doing. Check. 2 is let's get as many listens as possible, because the more listens of this episode of the podcast that we get, the more of Lo's books I'm going to hand out because, hey, people are excited about it. 3 is join a platform. So I've got Instagram, Facebook, and an email list. So whichever one you feel comfortable with, if you like the Amadon Planet, or what would you do? You'd not like it. You follow at Amadon Planet on Instagram. That's 1. You could like the Amadon Planet Facebook page. That's 2. Or you can join the Amadon Planet email list, which gets you access to the Amadon Planet download. But that's 3. So to do that one, you go to AmadonPlanet.com. There's many buttons on that front page to join the email list. If you join one of those platforms, we'll have either an email that goes out through the email list or posts that go out to those feeds that will tell you how you can be eligible for this giveaway. And again, if we get a lot of downloads of this, we're going to give out a few of these books, but at a minimum, 1 book will be given away per platform. So I'm excited to do that. I'm excited to support Lo's books. We're going to have links in the show notes if you just want to pre-order the book anyway. But we'll have some other things that are going to happen throughout the month associated with each episode. So excited for this. Excited for this birthday month. Excited to celebrate a little bit. 34 episodes. And what a gift. I mean, I feel that's a gift to me that people are still listening after 34 episodes. So thankful. But you know what? Let's not delay anymore. I love this conversation with Lo. Let's get into it right now. Here's my good friend, Lo Alaman. Lo Alaman, thank you so much for joining me on the Amadon Planet podcast.
Come on.
Oh, yeah. Here we go. Long time coming. Well, welcome to the planet. I don't know what that means, but yeah, welcome to the planet. This is such a pleasure. I've been, we have a history. We'll go through that in a little bit, but I'm just excited that we finally got a chance to connect and get you on the podcast. I had this idea for this Create podcast series, like where we're talking about the creative arts and how do we tap into that on teaching better, because that's the main thing on the planet. We're thinking about how to teach better, and you are a teacher in multiple different ways. And so thank you for being here, Lo. I appreciate you coming.
Man, it's so good to be on here. I miss your beautiful face. It's awesome. For those podcasts, and you can't see it, but Joel's gorgeous. So I feel bad for y'all.
Oh my goodness, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, and it's beautiful to see your face too. Hey, could you just, for those that don't know you, I mean, that's a shame if they don't know you, but for those that don't, could you give yourself a little bit of introduction, give them some space to figure out who is Lo?
Absolutely. So I am an artist, a creative, and a minister of the gospel of Jesus. I am in Houston, Texas now, kind of a suburb of Houston, the Woodlands. I'm at a church out here, but I'm from Mississippi, grew up in Columbia, spent a few years in Oxford, and just trying to figure out what calling looks like. I had this idea that accepting a call to ministry looked like I was going to do one thing the rest of my life, and that's just not how I'm wired. Thankfully, God gives me opportunities to do a bunch of different things. And so, I think I term myself as like a creative and a minister more than a pastor, because that job title seems a lot more rigid than what I think I actually do.
Well, then when I end the podcast, I say like this world. I say this world is a better place because you've decided to use the gifts you've been given to serve others. And I think of you, like I think of how like God has like put you together and how you're wired up, and they figure like I'm going to use these things, and how that supports me and my family and all that stuff. It's all going to come. It's all going to come. But man, just seeing how you are rocking it, it's a beautiful thing.
Come on, fam. Appreciate that, bro.
And you forgot another thing that we have in common is we are both Packer fans.
We are. Well, let's clarify that. We are Packer fans, but my allegiance tends to lie much more with people. So my Packerdom comes from loving Brett Favre. I grew up not too far away from Brett Favre's house in Hattiesburg.
That's right. And wave at him while he's mowing the lawn. It's great. Yeah.
Pretty much. He doesn't mow his lawn.
I think he does, actually. I think he enjoys it. I really do. But anyway, that's not beside the point.
It's a lot of lawn.
I assume so.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, I don't think he had a Jets jersey. Come on now.
I did not have a Jets jersey.
There you go.
I did watch the games.
There you go. So, and another thing, thinking about all the different experiences that you've had within your teaching. I know you've done here in Oxford. I know that you were a youth minister for my kid, and like that was a big impact on his life. And also seeing some of your spoken word ministry. Like, how do you think of yourself as a teacher through those different things?
Yeah, man. I think so. For me, I've been kind of leaning heavily into this idea of, I'm not in the business of giving information. I think if someone wants information, we're in the digital age, you can access information pretty easily. I feel like my job as a communicator is to take information and make it relevant, make it practical, make it useful in a way that it seems like it has skin on it. So whether it's preaching or poetry, and poetry is a really fun thing because it kind of puts more emotion and imagination as opposed to just information. To kind of get deeper into what it means for us to be human. We don't just learn by reading books alone. We learn through experience. We learn through moments. And so I think my job as a communicator is to create moments that are lasting, that are impressions for people. I think all the time of like images and, if I hear like the Disney theme song come on, which is actually Pinocchio, which I did not know until like this year. But when I hear that, like it takes me back to a place, right? So that information triggers a memory and an emotion and a feeling, you know what I mean? Uh-huh. And so that's what I want to do. I want to help use language, use dialogue, and even use art to bring people to not just information, but to emotion and imagination.
It gives me think like, part of like when we talk about in teaching, like my beginning teachers, they're juniors, they're getting into this like educational psychology sort of stuff. And we talk about, like I've made sense of the world, but then I get a shove. Whether it's a weird math problem or it's a reading or something. And I think, some of the times when I would hear you teach or hear you teach and preach or a poem that you give, and it's like, yeah, you're not the information I have, but the way you put it together, the insight you give is like a shove, and it's like, oh, and now I've got to make sense of the world again, right? I got to like, given this new way of interpreting this information, how do I make sense? And so you definitely have a gift in doing that. And so I appreciate you sharing that with the world.
Thanks, man. We appreciate that.
So in thinking about teaching and thinking about, the different modes that you do that in order to, give folks those sorts of moments, what are some learnings you've had in either your ministry positions or preaching, doing poetry, whatever you want to point to? What are some learnings that you've had?
Man, one thing I've learned is that my job is, as much as it is to be true and faithful to content, it's also to be true and faithful to connection. I have to be really aware of, because when I speak a different kind of thing, whether it's youth camps or a church setting or even a secular setting where it's like much more of an art scene. Mm-hmm. And so as much time as I want to spend on knowing my content, I really want to know who I'm speaking to, and to be just as faithful in serving the connection piece as opposed to just focusing on what I'm teaching. Early on, I used to just focus a lot on content. Like I want to make sure I say it like I want to say it and present it like I want to present it, as opposed to saying it like they need to hear it and presenting it like they would understand it. Mm. And so, yeah, man, learning that connection piece has been huge for me as a communicator, as a minister. And on the flip side, I think another thing I've learned is like the pay for what I do is relationship, right? So if I just speak really well, and this is kind of like Paul in 1 Corinthians 13, where he's like, if I have this beautiful sound, but I don't have love, I've just kind of been noisy. I haven't really done anything effective. And so for me, I want to make sure that I'm not leaving all the answers on the table. I want to leave some space for us to have a conversation afterwards. A lot of things I'm trying to get into now is like creating platforms for ongoing conversations. So after I preach or after I do a poem, to say, hey, come join me on this platform so we can talk about it. Don't just assume that I got it all right. And maybe I hit you in the way that you want to talk about more. Let's talk about that. So wanting to point folks back to a place where we can connect further is just huge, particularly as I'm trying to communicate the gospel and Jesus' heart for people.
Oh yeah. I mean, like thinking about you just gave them a shove and like they're teetering and they're trying to figure it out. And like, hey, here's this avenue to like come and talk and make sense of what we just, and like, ooh, it's probably like this relief valve, like, now I have some place like to take these emotions, these feelings, these like confusion, even maybe sometimes where like, to now see like to have somebody to talk and sort it out. And I think that's a lot of things, reading books or whatever. And people are, maybe doing that in isolation right now. And like, they're having all these ideas and things, but how do they make sense of it? And like offering a platform, that's awesome.
Yeah. I stole the idea mostly from Bob Goff. He wrote this book and he put his number on the book. And he was like, hey, if you feel away, call me. Let's talk about it. And I think just giving that access to people, I think does more of the job than just the moment or just the presentation. Because I think you had an amazing book. Love Does is an awesome book. But then to also offer yourself and give access to yourself. I think he had like a burner phone. It's not his actual phone. But still like giving people access to him afterwards is just really cool.
Oh yeah. That was like, I think episode 2 of this podcast we did, Love Does. And that phone number in the back. And like, I don't know if I've gone to see him talk and like, his phone's ringing during the talk. And it's like, every now and then answer it. And it's like being totally present with folks and offering those connections. That's like, man, the things we need right now, right? Like just being able, and I always tell folks on this podcast, like this is actually one of the big excuses for the podcast is to have these, it's an excuse to have a conversation with loads, right? To be, hey, come on, get them on the line. Let's go.
I love it.
So that was 2. You got another one? You got any other learnings?
I do. The last thing I'm learning right now for me is that the teaching journey is not just for the people who are listening. It grows me too. And so to always like, let's not be afraid to go back to old material or to read a story and to remind myself like, hey, I'm a learner just as much as I am a teacher. And I've been getting a lot of encouragement from like the original language for what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Like the word, it means to be a learner. Like a disciple of Jesus was really a learner of Jesus. And what I love about that is it means I don't have to have that weird pressure of I've arrived or I have it all figured out. But just as much as I'm sharing with my people, whether it's an audience or friends or whatever it looks like, I'm also trying to submit myself and come at it pretty humbly to remind myself like, hey, dude, you're growing too. And so inviting myself to be a part of the journey has been a huge help, just in my ability to share, but also my ability to grow.
So what's an example? Like, what's something like, some material that you had before that you used, and then you came back to it and you're like, oh, I see this a little differently. Do you have an example of that?
I do, man. So I wrote a poem. Maybe I want to say I wrote it when I was in Oxford, about 2014 or 15. And I believed in it. I loved it. I shared it. And I still hold many convictions to that poem. But a couple weeks ago, I was asked to share a poem, and I was like, oh, this poem fits perfectly. And so I read the poem, and I'm like, wow, a lot of the things I said in this poem, though I do still feel, they aren't true for my life anymore. And so I had a chance to like rework a poem. So the poem was about like me having a son. I have a daughter. The poem was about what I expected parenthood to look like. And it's like, my parenting looks nothing like that. I think that's still the ideal. But to just become a little bit more honest with, hey, this is what it actually looks like to live out my story right now in light of some content I wrote before. Yeah. I think what it helped me do is to like kind of come to grips with who I've become. Not in a bad way, but just to be honest about it and be like, wow, a lot of things you assume were going to be true about your parenting and assume were going to be true about your lifestyle just aren't true anymore. And seeing how God was kind of gracious in that moment to be like, yeah, this doesn't go how you plan. But my plan's still pretty perfect for your life. It was encouraging.
Yeah, that's good. That gets me thinking about like something I heard you teach when, I also have some learnings I have from you that I wanted to pop in, but like one of them was about that connection piece that you initially started with one of your learnings, like putting connection at the center of teaching. And like, I remember I don't know if you remember the first time I dropped off Noah for youth group, and I was going to drop him off, and like, I was going to go, I got my laptop, I'm going to go do some work, like, hey, like I got an hour and I'll come back and like maybe get a cup of coffee or something like that. And you just said to her, like, are you staying? And it was like, no, I'm going to go. And then like I left, and I'm like, wait a second. Like, and it just like that, those two words that were just like, like, what, why wouldn't you stay? Like, why wouldn't you be a part of this? Why wouldn't you, and it's almost like, and I know maybe we're saying that, but like, it got me to think like it was a shove, right? It was a shove. It was like, hey, you know what? This kid who is now, taller than me and all this stuff, he's crazy. The fact that he's only going to be here this long, like you really need to go do that, crush your email for 30 minutes when you can stay here and be a part of this. And I remember too, and this is the thing, I stayed and like you were given some teaching on like the creation of the world and talking about how God made the world and he made it good. Right. And so like I have my shirt, my Be the Good shirt. And and like, this was like, and I think about that whenever I put this shirt on, cause you're like, the world has been made and it is good. It's not perfect. Right. And like it, and because God said, like, we can be actors in this. We can be the good, right? We can believe there's good in the world, but we can also be the good and make it. And so like, I would have missed that without, you're like, hey, you can stick around. And like, I came back and like able to, learn alongside him and like have conversations about that sort of stuff. And like, so that it was like, not just the content, like I could have got that I've read that passage before, but it was like in the context with connections, the relationships in order for us to do something together. And so I don't know, like I put that on you as like, giving me that shove that I need in that moment and really embracing those. Hey, there's not going to be that many of these left, like until,
that's so real, man. Right? That's so, and I think what I'm learning just as a parent, cause I don't think of myself as a teacher with my daughter, like I'm her dad. Yeah. But inevitably, like she learned so much from us, both intentionally and unintentionally. So,
yeah.
Dude, the other day I was changing a diaper. It was about like 3 months ago. And it was a really massive, uncomfortable poop. Did not love that moment. And I was like, oh, Jesus. From that day on, she has not stopped saying Jesus' name. That's how she learned. That's how she learned the name of our Savior. Yeah. But that wasn't a moment where I was like, hey, let's like sit down and, we have like we teach her sign language and our ABCs and everything like that. And she grabs it really quickly, but that wasn't a teaching moment. It was a, let's just be present with each other moment. And so when a parent drops their kid off to youth group, the idea is, oh, you're going to go to your learning space now. I'm going to go to my adult space now, as if those spaces can't coexist.
Right.
As if a different kind of learning doesn't happen when we're just present with our kids. So it's super dope that you stayed. Also, to shout out Joel's one of the main parents that stuck around and became like a volunteer without being asked to. I don't know if I ever asked formally, but you're awesome.
Yeah, you get me without just, well, I suppose we should put him to use. But yeah, but I mean, seeing, so the last podcast, 2 podcasts ago, we talked about like, what's the center? Like it was about technology. It's like the TechWise family, but basically one of the big learnings I had in there was like, what's the center of your home, right? What's the center of your teaching? What's the center if like, and like talking about if the center is relationships, right? Yeah. And so even with all the technology that we're using and all the different things that's out there, like if the center is our relationships, either it's familial or classroom or minister, like these relationships are at the center, like that's where the good stuff is going to happen. And yeah, those are tools that can help facilitate the other, there's tools out there that can facilitate those connections. But yeah, I mean, what is at the center of your relationship? And I think, I see that in the stuff that you're doing is like, trying to connect people to these relationships out there, whether it's within their family, within their community, within their church. And I think I don't know, I'm a big fan, Lo. I'm a big fan, Lo fan.
I'm a fan of you, fam.
So when we reflect back, when you reflect back on like, cause you've been doing this for, you're getting up there now, Lo. Like you've been doing this for a while.
Fam. I am old.
Yeah. Thinking about how long you've been doing this work and thinking about, okay, if I'm take my brain from now and able to rewind a little bit, is there things that you would have done differently in your teaching from the get-go? Absolutely.
I think I felt as a younger person, kind of that whole, 1 Timothy 4 or whatever, like Paul's encouraging, like, don't let people look down on you in your youth. I interpreted that as I have to make sure that I show up to be like the most knowledgeable about any topic that I speak about. So when I spoke about something, I wanted to make sure that I knew that content so well. And I like to study. I like the Bible. I like poetry and art. So it wasn't hard to kind of be proficient, I guess, in that. But I don't think I really took advantage of the connecting piece until probably the last 3 or 4 years. Really it was kind of like going out of the door from the orchard, where I recognized that, man, these kids only listen to me after we hang out, and I realized that it's not that they don't care about the content. I think there are several kids that legit were hungry to want to learn and stuff, but they really didn't care about me sharing it with them until we actually did some time hanging out and building that relationship. Mm-hmm. And so I think I would have prioritized my time to be a little less in my head about how am I going to be perceived as a communicator versus letting these kids get to know who I am. So when I came out to Texas, a lot of my ministry looked a lot more like, inviting kids over to the house as opposed to us meeting in a third space. And not that third spaces are bad, but there's, again, it's like that presence just does something a little different. I'm a different kind of dude at home than I am on the basketball court. Because on the basketball court, I'm coming for your throat, But just like having that space to hang out, I think I would have prioritized that more. Even when I do camps, it's weird because when I do camps, I do this. When I go to camps, I'm speaking at a conference, I'm naturally in the hallway. I'm naturally, where the kids are fishing, or I'm actually where we're playing basketball, because I know that relationship is a priority, and I only have a week to build that. And so I prioritize, spending that relational time so that when I'm on the stage, they're listening. I didn't do that as much with just the place I was vocationally, or my main job. And I didn't realize, this is the same thing. I need to be as intentional about being relational here as I am in that week-long camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that establishing of they won't care what you know until they know that you care, right? And building those,
which is cliche but true. It's so true.
I'm trying to get my clinical instructor. So when I was a student teacher, my clinical instructor Joe Dye, he hammered that in from me from the get-go, and we're trying to get him on the podcast so he can share some of his golden nuggets, because they're still sitting with me 20 years later. But and so it's like saying that, and then it's like, are you doing it right? And so because it's cliche sometimes, or hypocritical when people are saying that, and then like, okay, as soon as the bell rings, they're out the door. As soon as the minister, they're out the door. Like they don't have those third space or those other spaces that you're saying, like after put, like, hey, how do we communicate and make sense of this stuff? Like, I mean, that's here. I'm demonstrating it, you know?
Well, I think it's learning to see this is not a connection is not helping your teaching. Connection is a part of your teaching. Like it's a part of how you present, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so it took me a while to realize that like I am actually doing the work by connecting. Like connecting is a part of the work. It's not just helping the work, it's part of the work.
Right. Yeah, because the things that within those relationships, you're also showing the things that you're teaching as well, right? You know?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So what's the best thing you do in your teaching, or have you witnessed in your teaching? I don't know, however you want to take that question.
So this is going to sound really cheesy or whatever, but like, I legit love to see somebody do something better than me. And there are moments where I have a chance to kind of look back and, you know, see some of the kids who I've hung out with, or even young adults, because I was doing college ministry for a little while. And man, to see them step into teaching roles is huge. Like, and it's almost like, I mean, it's a little cheesy, but when we think about ourselves as ministers, we're told to work ourselves out of a job. Like we want to, you know, do this thing well, invite people in. And my perspective was always like, okay, I invite volunteers to do the job. I never thought invite the kids to actually do the teaching, or invite the folks you're ministering to do ministry. And man, I've had my most prideful / just like humbling moments when I see a kid like teaching, and they teach like I teach, which is really interesting. It's kind of like, oh, I do that? Why did I do that? So there's a kid named Andres. Andres Flores actually just was in his wedding 3 weeks ago, which is really crazy. I met Andres when he was 16, 17 years old, and been a part of his life for a little while. He was a senior when I came into the student ministry I was a part of, and then he was a college student while I was doing college ministry out in San Antonio. Great kid. And he just got married. He's like a young man now. It's like, holy cow, the time went really fast. But I've invited him. You know, he was an intern for me in my college ministry. I've invited him to come and like with me to speaking events, and he had a chance to teach during his internship, and he stood like me. It was so weird. He held his hands like I hold my hands. I'm like, that is weird. Yeah. And it made me kind of feel a little self-conscious, but he did an amazing job. I thought I saw the way that he taught was significantly better than I taught when I was his age. Now there's still some places he can grow. And he speaks really fast, which I was like, hey dude, I know I'm the same way. Slow down. But man, it is probably the greatest gift to watch the people that you're teaching, not just do what you're teaching them how to do, but also teach like you're teaching. Like it's huge.
Yeah. I mean, that's like legacy time, right? So like if, you know, and you've moved away from there, right? And so like, but your ministry still exists there. Your teaching still exists. Your impact and I mean, I think that's where we think of, you know, teachers and things when I, you know, one of the tests I'll give for a teacher, like if you're not there, like let's say you're sick, you know, like in our current time, like, right, you might have to quarantine or something like that. You have to remove yourself from the classroom. Does it still operate without you? Right? Mm-hmm. Does your impact still exist within that classroom? Or, you know, and to think about that, the impact that you have on Andres, that teaching is there so much so he's embodying it, you know, like, and now he's even taking it to the next level. And like, what that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, man. What's interesting about him too, not to go off on a tangent, but he's actually doing student ministry now. It's like he's finishing school and everything, but it's funny. He does not have the same kind of build that I do. Like I am much more, like I love hanging out. It's my thing. Yeah. And I love, you know, the kind of artsy scene and everything like that. And that's not necessarily who he is. And so he's not copying like me as a person, but he is copying what he's learned from me. He's copying the methodology of how I teach and everything. And so I love seeing him become his own version of a teacher. It's not copying me, but like he's building upon what I've done. to make it make sense for his own discipleship and his own walk with Jesus and his own ministry, which is, it's just really encouraging.
That's awesome. I mean, I had similar sorts of ideas when I'm teaching teachers. I think the best way to teach teachers is to let them teach. So similar to what, I finally figured that out. You figured it out much sooner than I did. It took me a lot longer, is to figure out like, hey, let's get them up front and like let them see, and then I can be a coaching role or whatever like that. And that's gonna take all of our games to the next level. But thinking like that is like something that, if we're doing less, one of my students sent me this article about the self-obliterating professor, which is a really fancy way to say like, do less, right? So if you do less, so your students can do more, or whoever you're teaching can do more. Yeah. Well, now that allows you to do more. And like, there's, again, it's elevating, it's, whatever metaphor we want to use, like we're lifting the tide, we're whatever, all the boats are rising. I don't know. Like,
it changes a bit of the culture. So like right now I'm actually doing like a small group ministry, and our small groups are in homes. So we call it a home group ministry. And what I do with my leaders is I ask them, okay, tell me all the things that you do. And they list them. They're like, okay, well, I send out all the emails, and I, prepare the lesson, and I make sure everybody is on the same page, and I get all the prayer requests written down. It's like, okay, that's a lot. And I'm asking, okay, now what do your people do? And they're like, well, they just come and they just show up. And so here's the issue. The issue they're finding is that if they don't show up, if they're not coming that night, they may send a text. They never call. They feel like, I could not be here. Like, I'm just a consumer. If I don't show up, things will still roll the way it's supposed to roll. And I don't feel like my presence is necessary. And so what I've tried to teach my leaders how to do is, I want you to do one thing and one thing only. And that one thing is, I want you to shepherd this group. I want you to communicate with me and make sure that they're following along with vision. But all those roles that you did, you don't do those anymore. Like, you're done with those. And so we put names to everything they did. I was like, okay, this is all the email role and getting all the notes together. That's the scribe. You can't be the scribe. Pick so-and-so to be the scribe. Yeah. All the roles of, getting the prayer requests and sending the prayer requests out. Like, that's the prayer leader. That's not your job. That's this person's job. And so they're parsing all their responsibilities out. And the idea is, when their people show up, they show up as citizens, not consumers. They show up as a person that has to be there. Elsewise, our culture and our community doesn't exist. So your absence is felt when you don't show. You have a job to do. And I think that creates a different kind of dynamic in our space, to where they're no longer looking at themselves as, I have to make sure this community happens. I'm a part. I now lead in the community, but I'm not the end all be all result of the community.
Yeah. That's, I mean, so if like, if it's the way it was before, if you don't show up, the whole group falls apart. And like, but if somebody else doesn't show up, like, it's not noticed. And now it's like the world is, right? Where it's this interconnected web of, you will be missed that they're here. You will have to pick something up. But, another thing too, in that is, some people think like, I don't enjoy this, but I'm going to do it for the good of the group, versus somebody's like, that's my jam. You give it to me.
Mm-hmm. Come on.
I love sending that email. I love taking notes. And it's like, really? And it's like, you get to see the different gifts that people have and things. And it's like, just let the chef cook, man. Give him that email. He just wants to do it. Just, just love.
I'm taking that saying, let the chef cook.
That's right. Because, I mean, so you'd like this, my daughter, Annie, and, like chores, and, we're around the house all the time, and we're messing up the house a little bit. And so trying to find some things like do this, and do that, like some things she like doesn't get into. But like this past weekend, I'm like, I'm going to clean out the garage. I'm going to, and I use the keyword, I'm going to reorganize the garage. She's like, can I help? And because I found, like, if there's something about reorganizing a drawer or something like that, where she could take things out, sort them out, and like put them back in, and like that. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I found it like she loves doing it. I'm like, our garage has never looked better. It's so good. But like, it was tapping into her gift, and because she just wanted to do it, so it's beautiful.
So this. So Erica just finished her master's in health education. One of the classes she was taking was like education theories and like different types of learning. I'm going to say all the names wrong, but like something Reggio learning, and what's the other one? Like the little schools were like
PJ, Vygotsky, PJ.
Yeah, those stuffs, whatever. So the school that we sent our daughter to is one of these fancy ones where they don't tell the kid that they have to play with a thing. They kind of let them play with what they want to play with.
Yeah.
They don't make them play together. They let them play alongside each other. And it's literally their job is to not make the kid do a thing. It's to watch what the kid just does.
Right.
And how she's naturally wired and what she naturally draws toward. It's like, oh, that's how she's built. And so she's going to do, like, let's find a way to structure her to do all these other things through what she already loves to do. Right. And I think it's the same concept, right? I don't want you to clean the garage. We're going to reorganize the garage because you like that. That's right. That's how you get that. Yeah.
We clean the garage. Like, no. Reorganize. Oh, yes.
I'm about that's that life.
No, that's awesome. I mean, Katie's doing, my wife doing, for the listeners, is doing early childhood stuff, and she's working at our local preschool at the university. And like, that's sort of similar, like the whole play and like encouraging play. And like, and like, we're going to make another connection back to you. Like where I've seen you, there's some legendary games that I've seen you facilitate with some of the youth stuff. And it's like, part of the thing is like, how do we get kids to do things together in order to make connections, know each other's names and things like that? Well, get them to play a game or get them, in those sorts of like, hey, I want you to make connections. I want you to know each other's name. I want you to build relationships and like, okay, let's tap into this thing that you already want to do, this competitive nature. Now, all right, now we've got something here. Yes. And so like those sorts of things where it's not like, hey, you're going to do this versus, oh, you're already doing this. I'm just going to guide you a little bit and help facilitate the process of what I'm trying to get accomplished.
So this may get into something you're going to get into later, but like another part of like things I'm learning is there's such an emphasis on, at least for me, it was like, make sure these kids connect to me so that I can give them good content and they listen to me, whatever. But to build that community of learning, like helping them connect to each other is also just as key. And so like we've done this in several youth group settings to where my whole thinking about games is I don't just want to play a game to see you like me more. I want to make sure that you are, because if you come to a youth group and I'm not there, then what's the youth group? I need you to have a friend. And so I'll intend to play games where we have to be on teams, or you have to get to know somebody, or you have to like work with somebody to build something together. And I like putting games and things with youth space, but again, how I want to make sure I'm connecting and making sure that the content lands with people is most of my 40 and up crowd typically don't think they'll enjoy a game. They probably will, but they don't think they will. And so, but the same goal is there. How do I get these people who are in seats or facing one direction, they're only here to listen to me talk, how do I get them to connect with each other? And that's where the home group thing has been so huge, is learning to value. I spend almost more time with my home group curriculum and training my leaders than I do preparing sermons. Not that sermons aren't important, but I know that they're going to go a lot further if I put them in communities together as opposed to just hearing me. George Whitfield was giving commentary about John Wesley way back. And he was saying, like, on his deathbed, he was like, well, what do you think about John Wesley and how, how he ministers? Because they had very opposing views in theology. And Whitfield was like, well, I think that that Wesley's ministry is going to outlast mine because he had the wisdom and the foreknowledge to put his people in bands. And bands was basically what we think of as small groups. Whitfield just preached. Wesley put his people in relationship with each other. And at the end of Whitfield's life, he was like, that's where I missed it. Not that my theology was wrong, but I missed it by not putting my people in community.
Nice. What a testament to that. At the end of his life, he was able to see that, right? He was able to reflect back and make sure that that's captured and shared, So I'm amazed again by your skills as a poet and some of the things that you've put out there that you've shared with our community and just shared outright, and even shared at your wedding. That was a beautiful moment too. That went viral a little bit. But like,
y'all in the building though.
What's that?
But y'all were in the building.
Oh yeah. I was live.
Some folks saw it on the computer. You were there.
That's right. Yeah, I wish I could have been like, hey, but no, that spoiled the moment. but so, I mean, thinking about like how you express yourself with like one, I see there's this idea of the balance between the technical, right? There is a technical side to writing these poems, and I'm kind of curious about that. But then also with the creative, right? And so wondered like how you do that. How do you balance those two and thinking like, I'm trying to express myself. I've got some ideas like creatively, but then also I need to make sure that this actually is like a poem. So I don't know, like what is the exchange there? What's the tug of war that's going on there?
Yeah. So I don't have a tug of war necessarily. I have a direction. And so my creativity or my heart is kind of, it bends towards a way. and I know I want to communicate this thing. So we'll use the wedding poem as an example.
Yeah.
Erica comes to me about 4 or 5 months before the wedding. And she's like, hey, I want you to write a poem about, us. And I want you to say it at the wedding.
Uh-huh.
The initial idea, I did not know she wanted me to say it while she was walking down the aisle. I thought she wanted like the poem in vows form. I'm like, oh, for sure, I got that. But then that ended up not being what she was envisioning. And so it's her day. So we do. And so, yeah, I have a direction. Like I know how I feel about my wife to be, and I know my heart towards her. And so the creativity says, well, I feel these things. The technical piece is like, okay, well, it's almost like if I know I'm standing here and I'm trying to get over there, all these little technical things, the metaphors, the similes, a lot of things I use in my poetry is repetition and cadence. And I like to write using a particular kind of syllable count to make sure that it has a good rhythm to it. And all that is tools to get me where I'm trying to go. Creativity is where I want to be. The tools are helping me get there, And so that poem in particular, there was an extended metaphor, if you will, about song. And so the poem starts off with like, it's almost like a call to worship, gather around one and all.
Yeah,
we're kind of getting together for this worshipful moment. And I intentionally place little like almost like breadcrumbs to my theme throughout the poem. So I use the word genre. I use the word orchestra. I use different kind of like instruments. So I'm clearly talking about music in the extended metaphor.
Yeah.
But it's not like, oh, this is a whole thing about, music. We're going here. We're talking about his love for this woman. The music is just a metaphor for it. The poem actually ends with us saying, we'll sing this song forever. Or this song will be ours forever. And so it's like, I start here, I end here. I use all these different tools to get us to this point, whether it's the cadence, whether it's the metaphors I use in between there. I also want to place theology in that. And so for me, theology is a part of like, okay, I know I'm going here. What tools do I have? And so I'll borrow different scenes of scripture. I even use like different verses of scripture in the poem to make sure that I'm continue to weave that thread. So it's one direction. Creativity is a direction. It's just, these are tools to help me get where I'm trying to go.
That's awesome. I'm thinking about the beautiful scene of your wedding and you saying that, and just the amazingness. But at the same time, I'm also thinking now of my connection to math.
Makes sense.
That's right. But what you're saying, so I want my current students, my pre-service teachers who are seeing mathematics, and some of them have this history, this relationship with mathematics is a little stormy and everything. But but they're also very creative individuals. They want to care and love for their kids. And I want them to see like caring and loving for their kids is the direction, right? And getting them to do like problems with their kids and letting the kids express themselves through the different ways that they're going to solve these problems, and that you're showing them the tools, right, in order to do that within their classroom. Like, here's how you can best care for your students, that's out there. And that kind of, you put it in a much better way, but like thinking about like that thing is out there, that goal of, creativity, or that goal for care and love for your students is like out there. And like, what are the tools I'm trying to give them in order to accomplish that? And we're going to post a link to that video just because I got to rewatch it again and look for the breadcrumbs and things like that. Cause it's fascinating to see, cause I've seen a number of your poems, and I've seen you do some live, and I've seen them on videos too. And like, just, I don't know, it's like part of the mystery of seeing how it happens, but seeing you break it down a little bit like that. That's awesome. I'm excited to rewatch them now.
Well, so there's a guy, he's actually the main pastor at the Orchard in Tupelo now. He was a teaching pastor. So when I was an intern at the Orchard, the main campus, he was like my discipler guy. Solid dude. His name's Will Rambo. Super good guy.
We love Rambo.
Oh man, love Rambo. And he was the first person that kind of introduced this concept to me of not teaching with points. And because I grew up, you have like a 3-point sermon or a 5-point sermon. It's like, I'm talking about this, then I get to this, and I get to this, and this makes my overall point. And he introduced this concept to me that I actually ended up putting in my poetry, which is I don't make points, I make movements. And that's his whole thing. And when he writes his sermons out, we did sermon prep stuff on Tuesday mornings at Cafe 212. And man, I miss that dude. But we would get together, and he would show me, this is how I'm writing my sermon out. I'm starting here, I'm getting to here. And he was like, all my in between is I'm trying to move to this point. I'm not trying to make a bunch of points. I'm making one point and I'm just moving to it. And so his scripture use or his, hermeneutic or the way he's exegeting the text, it's all to get to this point. Because at the end of the day, I don't just want my people to know this about the Bible. I want them to know how this Bible is pushing them in a direction. And same thing with with me and Erica. This poem is not going to be a list of points about how much I like it. I think it's going to be really boring. I have one thing to say, and I'm going to use all these different things to move towards that statement. And so, yeah, movements versus points, I think is really cool. Take that same concept to your teachers, and I think it's, at the end of the semester, we have to have learned these things. But these are all movements, right? Like I'm moving us in the direction of having a robust understanding of a concept. But overall, I'm also trying to become a light and a salt to help move you towards a direction in life to tell you, hey, you can do this. You have aptitude for learning. You are not only a learner, but you can teach as well. Like I want to put you in a relationship where you can also share things. I want to move you forward in direction. So yeah, I think I would not have thought to connect it to math, but I think you're artsy and you're creative.
I'm trying, man. But yeah, the idea of movements and I think of it's almost like I think about what are the major movements I want to have in a semester, right? And thinking about their own perspective on math and thinking about their students' perspective and who do they see as a doer of mathematics and how that, that might have been something that before that they need to shift and think about a doer of mathematics can look like a bunch of different ways, doing a bunch of different things. And so, those movements, I'm going to think about that one. But hey, I appreciate all the time that you gave to sharing some of your work and sharing some of your insight and expertise. This is outstanding. I'm curious though, do you have anything to share with the audience about anything to promote, anything that you got cooking?
Yeah, man. So it's been a crazy year with all kinds of.
Are you serious?
No, man. There's been some things happening. I don't know what it's like for y'all in Oxford, but it's been a crazy year, man. A lot of the tension I feel as an artist and as a creative and as a Black dude is I think that at any given time, any one particular person can handle about 2/3 of who I am. Like my Christian artist side, maybe not my Black side, or my Black artist side. I don't really care for my Christian side. And so there's a project that I've been working on that I think I get to finally incorporate all of me in it. And
awesome.
Man, I just wrote a book about, it's called We Sang a Dirge, and it's borrowing from Jesus' teaching in Matthew 11, where he's comparing the generation. It's like, there's a community of people who are crying out and they're singing happy songs and no one's dancing. They're singing sad songs and no one's mourning. And he likens the kingdom to the church when the church knows how to dance when it's time to dance and mourn when it's time to mourn. And so a lot of, I think, the outcries of the Black community and the Black church about social injustice and police brutality or just weird inequalities and racial tension that I think we all feel, we haven't always known what to do with it. And so a lot of arguments have been made, a lot of perspectives have been shared. I just feel like I think art may have a chance to get us to a place that arguments won't. And so I wrote some poems to kind of just share my heart and express, not like I'm right about things, but this is how my experience has been. Yeah. And the book even goes through movements, right? The book moves through inviting people to lean into the discussion, to lament with people as opposed to winning arguments, to long for a future together, to listen to each other. And so it's moving in all these directions to make one point that our groaning and the tension that we feel, I think, reflects Romans 8:19, where it's all of creation is groaning in this expectation for the kingdom of God, the children of God, to be visible, to make one. And so, yeah, man, that book's dropping in a month or so, and I'm super excited about that. It's called We Sang a Dirge. And then in light of that, I wanted to have folks to have a place to connect afterwards. I'm also launching this podcast/webisode platform called The Filter Project, where you can have conversations about the poems and about arts and Blackness and Christianness and all kind of stuff.
This is exciting. So can people pre-order that book?
They can. I think the pre-order thing goes live next week. So I'll send you information.
So by the time this thing drops, if people are listening to this, there'll be a link on AmadonPlanet.com in the show notes for this episode. And people can go right there and order it. And maybe we can have, after the poem comes out or after the book comes out, we can maybe have a revisit and talk just about
Let's do it. Come on.
There we go. All right. Fantastic.
Yeah, man.
So, Lo, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Alaman Planet podcast. We really appreciate it. This was awesome. And I'm excited for the book. I'm excited for the project. I'm excited for everything you got going on and for your family. And just thank you for joining me.
Dude, you're the homie.
There we go. That's Lo. Love that guy. Yeah, so we want to give away some of his books. So he just talked about it at the end of the episode. And if you want to be eligible again, you follow at Amadon Planet on Instagram. You can like the Amadon Planet Facebook page, or you can join the email list. Or you can do all three if you want. And you can join the email list at AmadonPlanet.com. Hit any of the buttons. We'll be sending out some information through either of any of those channels about how you can then become eligible. It's gonna be real simple steps that you follow, just to say, like, basically to acknowledge, like, hey, I liked the book. Okay. And so we're going to give away a couple of those, or a book per platform. And if we get a lot of downloads of this, we're going to give away more books. So if you like the episode, you think other people should listen to it, go ahead and share it. That'd be great. And so the more episodes, or the more listens we get to it, the more of Lo's book we'll give out. And we're going to do, again, Amadon Planet birthday giveaway month is all of October. We're going to have at least 3 different things where we're going to give away, and excited for this opportunity. So if you're looking for ways to support the podcast, you can do some of these things I've already said. Rate and review, subscribe, rate and review the podcast. Subscribe to the Amadon Planet download, which is that email list containing teaching resources and updates from Amadon Planet. You can follow and you can do that on the AmadonPlanet.com. There's many buttons there to join the email list. You can follow at Amadon Planet on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or like the Amadon Planet Facebook page. Those are also ways you can support Amadon Planet. And you can check out the Amadon Planet store. So some of that Be the Good swag that we're going to be giving away sometime during this month too. You can get that. You can get some of that stuff by going to the link at the bottom of AmadonPlanet.com. You can also access the Amadon Planet bookshop. There's lots of basically any book that I've mentioned so far that you can find in bookstores, you can access through that link. And then, and again, if you're looking for Lo's book, go to the show notes for this page. That's AmadonPlanet.com/episode 34. That's where you would find those access to Lo's book if you just want to pre-order it yourself. You can get that there. Anyway, all those purchases, if you go to the bookshop or the Amadon Planet bookshop or Amadon Planet store, both of those support the production costs of the podcast. And we are very appreciative of any support that you can provide. And it's cool to see folks out there with the Be the Good stuff. So in conclusion, thank you for listening to this episode of the Amadon Planet podcast. Thank you to Lo for sharing his expertise and his time. Love talking to that guy. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. And finally, thank you to all of you out there who are seeking to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you have been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.